Abandoned Psychiatric Hospital. Evan and Jake loved urban legends. Their online channel was full of videos from old factories, tunnels, and houses that no one had visited in a long time. One day, they came across a very old map. On this map of the city, there was a mark that said, State Psychiatric Institution. Brave and courageous Jake grimaced and said, "They say even stalkers don't go there." It was built in 1915 and closed in 1969 after a fire broke out in this psychiatric hospital. Great, Evan grinned. Just what we need for a Halloween video. The road to the clinic led through the forest. The closer they got to the psychiatric clinic, the thicker the fog became. The car stalled right in front of the gates, which were overgrown with ivy. The inscription on the rusty sign was barely legible. State Psychiatric Institution for the mentally. Evan took out his camera and turned on the flashlight. He began shooting the first frames. The camera shook in his hands. However, the camera was not shaking from fear, but from anticipation. From the anticipation of something unusual and previously unknown. Jake stood nearby and looked around nervously. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "It sounds like there's someone else here besides us." However, the wind blowing through the clinic could have made any door creak. The friends stepped over the threshold of the front door. Inside it smelled of dust, old paint, and something sweet and rotten. They walked down the hallway, shining their flashlights on the walls covered with strange words. "Don't trust them." "Time is not here." "More graffiti," Evan chuckled. "It's the perfect mental hospital setting." On the second floor, they found an old ward. Metal beds, straps on the handrails, yellowed photographs of patients hung on the wall, faces with burnt-out eyes, some smiling, others crying. Evan zoomed in with his camera and said, "Jake, this is gold. We're going to get 1,000,000 views." At that moment, a light on the ceiling flickered. However, Evan and Jake knew that there was no electricity in this building. After the light on the ceiling flickered, there was a flash, and at that moment, everything changed. The floor became clean, the walls freshly painted, and the lights burned brightly. Somewhere in the distance, voices could be heard, along with ringing laughter and the slamming of doors. "What is this?" "Evan, where's the dust? Where's the junk?" Jake said, and froze. A man in a white coat walked down the hallway, ignoring them. Then a woman in a coat with bandages on her arms. "Are you filming this?" Evan asked. "I don't know." Jake pressed the camera to his chest. "Maybe it's a dream?" The air was too thick, the smells too real. Somewhere behind the wall, people were screaming. A woman's voice repeated, "Don't look out the windows. Don't look." They rushed back to the exit. Where the door had been, there was now a long corridor, beyond which they could see a courtyard with patients. Nurses led them in pairs, as if in some kind of eerie ritual. One man noticed his friends through the glass and suddenly smiled. "You're late," he said. Suddenly, a very loud siren sounded. A doctor wearing a mask resembling a surgical mask came around the corner. He was holding a syringe in his hands. "New patients?" he said loudly. "Transferred from Block D?" Evan and Jake took a couple of steps back. "We just got lost," Evan began, but the doctor took a step forward. "Don't worry. After the procedure, you'll forget everything." And then there was a flash of light, blinding white. Evan felt himself falling. Everything spun around him. When he came to, the corridor was ruined and dusty again. Only one window glowed with a soft light. Jake was gone. "Jake!" he shouted. The echo responded with emptiness. A fresh inscription remained on the wall, as if scratched with fingernails. "Jake stayed with us. The doctor is pleased." Evan rushed to the exit. The gate was open. The forest was the same, but the fog had grown thicker. He ran breathlessly to the car. The engine started right away. He drove back to the city, trying not to look in the rearview mirror. Only when he reached his apartment did he allow himself to catch his breath. The camera had been on the whole time. About an hour later, when he came to his senses, he began reviewing the video camera recordings. Everything looked different on the recording. Destroyed wards, debris, no patients or doctors. Only in one frame, Jake is standing by the window, smiling. Behind him, a man in a white coat puts his hand on his shoulder. Evan couldn't sleep that night. He rewound the video over and over again. At one point, at 001347, the camera picks up a voice. "One of you has returned. The other will stay." The next morning, Evan drove to the psychiatric clinic. However, instead of the building, there was only an empty field. No foundation, no bricks, nothing. Only a metal plaque, half buried in the ground. This was the site of the State Psychiatric Institution for the mentally. It was demolished in 1979 after a fire that claimed the lives of 30 patients. Under this plaque, Evan saw a fresh inscription made with paint. "Jake Hayden, 2025. Evan dropped to his knees. His hands were shaking. The wind rustled the grass, and for a moment he thought he heard a faint sound in the distance, a hollow sound like the creak of a door opening. He looked toward the fog and saw a figure behind the trees, a white coat, a hand waving at him, inviting him back. From that day on, Evan did not post any more videos on the internet. However, a few months later, a new channel appeared on the internet. State Psychiatric Institution. The first video was an old video. In this video, a ward, a doctor wearing a mask, and a man who looks very much like Jacob sitting on a metal chair. The doctor looks straight into the camera and whispers, "He stayed with me.